Thank God it's Friday. Hope everybody had a great week. Jimmy here in Chicago, getting ready to head to New Orleans for the first time. Looking forward to that. And before I head out to O'Hare Airport, I want to drop a short story today. I'm calling it The Good Guys versus the Bad Guys. And what I mean by that, we're going to talk about some of the top prosecutors in Chicago that lock up all these wise guys and mob guys. We're also going to talk about some of the top defense attorneys in Chicago. A few of them I actually had a chance to meet, and guys that I actually seen in the courtroom. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. I appreciate all the comments. And one thing I want to remind everybody, 90% of my stories are all about the trials that I went to. My stories are not about books, magazines that I read, movies, or documentaries. This is my perspective of what it's like being in a major federal courtroom. As I mentioned before, these trials, whether it's a federal trial or a state trial, are open to the public. That's right, anybody can go. Here's the Dirksen Federal Building right there in the financial district on Chicago or on Jackson and State. You could easily take the bus or the train there. The Blue Line train literally takes you right to the front door. This is close to the MCC jail, Royal Pawn, Chicago Board of Trade, DePaul University, Harold Washington Library, right there in the heart of the loop. All you have to do when you walk into that lobby is show your ID, go through the metal detector, and as long as you're not on the blacklist, you can access any courtroom in the building. Yes, we do have a blacklist. This keeps away any people that aren't supposed to be anywhere near or inside a federal building to help protect us all. Now, a lot of the old timers in my neighborhood, they say as soon as you walk into the lobby of the Dirksen Federal Building, your rights go right out the frickin' window. Go up to the law library, you find out what's on the docket. Or you can ask one of the federal marshals, and they'll be more than happy to tell you what floor and what courtroom the trial is in. Here's an inside of the courtroom at the Dirksen Federal Building. The bigger trials are usually on the top floor, the 25th floor, because they hold the most people. That's where I see the family secrets trial. I also see the Governor Rod Blagojevich trial up on the 25th floor. Now, there's no cameras allowed in the courtroom, unlike other states, but usually in the center of the courtroom or sometimes off to the side, you'll see the judge. The judge is like the king of the courtroom. You'll see either on the far left or the far right, that's where the jury sits. And usually on the left side is the defense table. That's where the defendants are, surrounded by their team of lawyers. And on the right side is usually where the prosecutor and their lawyers are. Now, in the gallows where I sit, you'll see maybe a few court buffs like myself, maybe a couple law students, federal marshals, federal agents. You'll see some of the defendants' family and friends there. You might even see some of the victims' family and friends. That's when you know it's real, when the family members are there. Because to the family, these defendants aren't mob guys or killers. This could be their father, their husband, their uncle. You also see a lot of people from the media. I usually like to sit next to the courtroom artist. That's the lady that sketches out the courtroom and then shows it to the media at the end of the day. But you got to be careful. If you sit on the right side, you're usually sitting where the prosecuting team is. If you sit on the left side, that's usually where some of the defendants' family and friends are. But this is an inside of the courtroom. Obviously, you got to be on your best behavior. Now, they also have the overflow courtroom. What that is say this courtroom here gets too packed. They have an overflow where you can go into an empty courtroom and just listen to the trial. You can hear the audio. But what I like about the overflow courtroom is inside that courtroom, you could eat a snack, read the newspaper, play on your phone, and talk. You're not inside the courtroom, but you can hear the trial. Now, obviously, inside the courtroom is the best. You always want to be inside to see all the drama unfold. But inside that courtroom, you cannot eat, you can't read, or have your phone on. I've only been in the overflow courtroom once, and that was during the Rod Blagojevich trial. But let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the prosecutors and some of the defense attorneys. We're going to start out with this guy here, Ron Safer. Going back to my very first trial, early 1990s, it was the United States versus Gus Alex. And Ron Safer and Chris Gere were two of the young prosecutors that prosecuted Gus Alex. Here's a photo of Carl Walsh's son escorting Gus Alex into the courtroom. Gus Alex underestimated the prosecution. He thought they didn't have much of a case on him, and he thought no jury in the world would ever believe a low-life scumbag murderer like Lenny Patrick. One little trick that the defense attorney used is every day they had Carl Walsh's son, as you can see in this photo, and another lady who was a little rough around the edges. They escorted Gus Alex to and from the courtroom every day. They each had Gus Alex by the arm. He walked real slow, taking baby steps. Obviously, he was frail. He is old. He had some health issues. I think he was like 76 years old at the time. But they were really playing this up, especially in front of the jury, just trying to get sympathy from the jury because Gus Alex was definitely getting up there in age. Gus Alex was represented by two of the best attorneys at the time, Sam Adams Sr. and Carl Walsh. Those guys represented Tony Accardo and other Chicago outfit heavyweights as well. Unfortunately for Gus Alex, though, the jury believed the government's informant, Lenny Patrick and James Lavelli, and they ended up convicting Gus Alex. But Gus Alex was a heavyweight in Chicago outfit, known as the political fixer. He pretty much controlled the entire Chicago Police Department, the Cook County Sheriff's Office, most of your aldermen. He had influence with businessmen, congressmen, senators, and he was very good friends with President Spiro Agnew. So Gus Alex had powerful connections all the way from the Chicago Police Department all the way up to the White House. He also controlled all the mob's money in their Swiss bank accounts. Now, it's interesting because years later, Ron Safer switched sides and became a top criminal defense attorney. Keep in mind, a lot of the prosecutor lawyers, they don't really make that much money, maybe $75,000, $80,000 a year. So they eventually switched sides like Ron Safer did to go for the big money. Now, here's another defense attorney in Chicago that I've seen several times in court. I've actually met him and made small talk with him. You got Ed Jensen. And I've heard from other lawyers that back in the day, this guy was one of the best. However, I seen him towards the end of the career when he wasn't as sharp. First time I ever seen him, Eddie Jensen, was at the Frankie Caruso trial. This was a very interesting trial that I went to because you had Chicago mob boss Frank Caruso, his son, Frankie Jr., and his friends committed a brutal hate crime against two black kids. They got in a lot of trouble. And because it was a state case, this trial was at the Cook County building. Eddie Jensen was in a wheelchair. He was zipping around the courtroom. They had Frankie dressed in an oversized suit. He was kind of slumped in the chair to make Frankie Caruso appear to be smaller than he really was. And one thing that was interesting during a highlight in the trial, Frankie Caruso's grandmother, his nana, actually had a heart attack in the courtroom. They cleared out the courtroom. The ambulance came, escorted her away. And I remember after court that day, I went home, I watched the news unfold, and I thought to myself, this might have been a ploy by Ed Jensen and the Caruso family to try to get sympathy from the jury. But the Caruso family did everything they could in their power to save Frankie from a long prison sentence. Unlike most defendants, Frankie Caruso showed great remorse. He apologized to Leonard Clark. The Caruso family took care of Leonard Clark big time. They got him a new house, new cars, new clothes. They even put him in school. When Frankie Caruso came out of jail, he actually became friends with Leonard Clark. But I'll never forget at sentencing, Frankie Caruso apologized, asking for forgiveness. The Leonard Clark's family forgave Frankie Caruso. And then Mr. Caruso, Sr., asked if he could speak. The judge allowed him to speak, and Frank Caruso Sr. went off on that judge. I never seen anybody talk to a judge like that. He reminded the judge that the Caruso family showed great remorse and that their son made amends with Leonard Clark, and he wanted the judge to give his son a break. However, that judge, I forget his name, had a personal vendetta against Frank Caruso Sr. and ended up giving Frank Jr. 8 years. Frank Sr.'s tantrum fell on deaf ears. The judge gave Frankie 8 years. I think he did like 2 years. He's home today with his family. Some people think he took over working in the Chicago outfit, but he's not. He's a legitimate kid doing the right thing. First time I ever met Frankie Caruso was at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. But that trial could have been a movie. This is Frankie Caruso being led into the 2016 California trial. I did a story on this if you guys want to check it out. Now here we got Bobby Salerno. Bobby Salerno was a boxer, made member of the Chicago outfit, part of the Rocky Infelice crew. As we all know, the Good Ship Lollipop indictment pinched Rocky Infelice, Sally De Laurentiis, Louis Marino, Bobby Bellavia, and Bobby Salerno. All the defendants were found guilty in the first trial. But the main charge, they killed one of the largest bookies in the country, Hal Smith. In that first trial, though, the jury hung on Bobby Salerno. He was ecstatic. Not that he beat the case, but that it was a hung jury. But fast forward 6 months later, the government tried him again for the murder of Hal Smith. They believed the government's witness, B.J. Jehoda, that Bobby Salerno was the man in black and was one of the men present when they brutally beat, tortured, and killed Hal Smith. But the great thing about the Bobby Salerno trial, both trials, is that his son, Alex Salerno, represented him. Now, like we talked about before, unlike New York, Philly, a lot of Chicago guys, they did not want their sons to get involved in that mob life. These guys became lawyers, stockbrokers, real estate developers, restaurant, bar owners, businessmen. Alex Salerno became a top defense attorney, and he represented his father. And during sentencing, he said that he's known his father his entire life, and he believes his father, that his father was not the man in black. His father was not the man in the kitchen at that house in Long Grove where Hal Smith was murdered. One interesting thing about Alex Salerno is him and Terrence Gillespie, they actually brought in a model of B.J. Jehoda's house into the courtroom to dispute B.J. Jehoda's testimony. B.J. Jehoda testified that Rocky Infelice told him to get Hal Smith to the house. So BJ invited Hal Smith to a dinner. They had drinks. He wanted to get him drunk, loosen him up. Then after dinner, BJ Jehoda asked Hal Smith, hey, let's go back to my house in Long Grove, which is only like 5-10 minutes away, for more drinks. This is where Hal Smith should have caught the play, but he didn't. When they got to the house, BJ Jehoda testified that when he pretended to go check the mail, he told Hal Smith, go on in through the kitchen sliding glass doors. I left it open. BJ Jehoda testified that somehow, some way, from the mailbox, he could see through the kitchen window into the kitchen, and he was able to identify Rocky and Felice, Louis Tomatoes, Bobby Bellavia, and he described Bobby Salerno, the man in black. Those were the men that allegedly brutally tortured and killed Hal Smith. But from the replica model house that Alex Salerno and Giuseppe brought in, there was no way BJ Jehoda could see inside that kitchen from the mailbox. So he lied on the stand. But unfortunately, the jury believed that lowlight BJ Jehoda, and he convicted Bobby Salerno. I actually got a chance to talk to Bobby Salerno during a break in the courtroom. He told me that he had 3 kids. His one son is a fine attorney, referring to Alex Salerno. His second child is going to law school as they speak. And the third kid dropped out of school in the 8th grade. He put his head down and he said, hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I thought that was kind of funny. He also told me that before the trial started, he told his son Alex that if we lose this case, I don't want you to hang your head low. I want you to continue to be a top defense attorney because I'm an old fighter. I can handle myself. And that's exactly what happened. Bobby Salerno was found guilty. Alex Salerno went on to become a top defense attorney in Chicago. As I mentioned before, I met Alex Salerno at several trials at the Dirksen Federal Building. I also met him at the 26th in California building because early on he represented a friend of mine, Bobby Pinozzo. But unfortunately, Alex Salerno died. He had some health issues, and why Bobby Salerno's father was locked up for killing Hal Smith, his son passed away. Tragedy for the Salerno family. This man was very well liked and respected. Alex Salerno was also really good friends with Mike Sarno. He sat in the Mike Sarno trial as well. Last time I seen Alex Salerno, he introduced me to his son at the Taylor Street Fest. But God bless Alex Salerno and his father, Bobby Salerno.
Knowing sort of taking out its parents' names or siblings.
Now we're going to go back to the early 1990s. The second trial I went to was a Sam Carlisi crew trial. The government's top witnesses were none other than Lenny Patrick and James Lavelli, the same 2 witnesses they used to convict Gus Alex. But imagine being in this courtroom, sitting 10 feet away from Chicago outfit boss Sam Carlisi, little Jimmy Marcello right next to him, and then down the pecking order, you got Tony Izzo, who's missing today, MIA, and then Tony the Hatch, who was murdered by the outfit. In the front, you got 2 of the Bonavolante brothers and 2 other guys, I'm forgetting their name. But here's 8 defendants, and each defendant has 1 to 2 lawyers. So imagine seeing the defense table with all these defendants, made guys, associates, surrounded by their lawyers. And there's a trick that some prosecutors and government witnesses, they try to pull during court. Prior to the start of the trial, Sam Carlisi's lawyer, Mr. Sullivan, said that you cannot refer to Sam Carlisi as the boss of Chicago outfit, and the judge agreed. But 2-3 times the prosecutor referred to Sam Carlisi as boss of Chicago outfit. Lenny Patrick did it twice, and James Lavelli did it once. They acted like it was a mistake, that was a slip of the tongue, but I think they did it deliberately just so the jury would hear that. But every time one of them would refer to Sam Carlisi as the boss, Carlisi would lose his tempo. He would stand up, start yelling. They'd have to clear the courtroom and get Carlisi to calm down. Joe Lopez at first represented Carlisi. Carlisi would growl at him and told him, you better cut off that ponytail. But Carlisi wasn't taking any chances. Rather than go with Joe Lopez, he decided to go with a more savvy, polished prosecutor who's now a defense attorney, Thomas Sullivan. But Joe Lopez told me that he could not handle the Hatch in court. He could not control him. And I was in court one day when Jimmy Lavelli was testifying. He was a member of Lenny Patrick's crew. And I thought for sure the Hatch was going to jump over the table and attack James Lavelli. But unfortunately, all the defendants were found guilty. The evidence was pretty much overwhelming. But that was the second trial. I went to the Sam Carlisi trial. I did a nice story on that if you want to check it out. Let's move on here. You got a father and son. You got Sam Adams Sr. on the left. That old man represented Gus Alex. And on the right, you got Sam Adams Jr. He represented Governor Blago. And during the Blago trial, the first trial was a hung jury. One black female held out. But in the second trial, anytime you go up against the government a second time, there's no way you're going to win because it just gives them a chance to fine-tune their case. Blago was found guilty. However, a lot of people that don't understand the law don't think Blago did anything wrong because there was never him actually handing over a cash envelope to anybody. There's really no violence. However, the intent was clear. It was his big mouth. They tapped his phone, and you could clearly hear what him, his good friend Stuart Levine, Tony Resco were up to. They were the main charges. He was trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat. He was trying to get $2 million from Jesse Jackson Jr. He referred to it as effing golden. He also tried to extort more campaign money from the president of a hospital. And when the doctor went to confront Blago after Blago kept ghosting him, rather than Blago meet with the man face to face, Blago's aide testified that Blago hid in the bathroom like a bitch. They were showing Blago's character. And as I said many times, you have to show remorse. Blago pissed off Judge Zagel many times. He showed no remorse. And as a result, Blago ended up getting like 14 years. If he would have behaved himself, showed remorse, and listened to Judge Zagel, he probably would have got a lighter sentence. Here's Reed Scar. He was the prosecutor that prosecuted Blago, and he really went after him, pointing his finger, referring to him as the defendant, referring to him as a corrupt politician. And during the closing arguments, Blago brought his two daughters dressed in little yellow and pink dresses during the government's closing. So the daughters sat in court and had to listen to all these bad things about their father. What Blago should have did was brought his daughters to closing arguments where the defense lawyers say great things about Blago. But as we all know, it was a slam dunk. Governor Rod Blagojevich, disgraced governor, was found guilty. And prior to him, George Ryan, another governor of Illinois, he was found guilty as well. I did stories on both of these guys. You can check them out. Here's top mob attorney in Chicago, Joe the Shark Lopez. He represented Tony the Hatch Chiaramonte during the Sam Carlisi trial. I seen him represent Mario Ranone on a gun charge. He also represented Frank Calabrese during the family secrets trial. He could not control Frank Calabrese. Frankie Calabrese had a defense. His defense was my brother and my son conspired together to steal all my money and lock me up for life. That's exactly what happened. But the judge and the prosecutor would not let Frankie Breeze to just go on and on and on. But this is Joe Lopez. He actually got shelved from practicing law at the Dirksen Federal Building, and hopefully they'll lift that suspension. I seen him recently at a Chicago Blackhawks game, but this is the top defense attorney in Chicago, one of the best. And one thing I like about Joe Lopez is he does not represent rats. Another top defense attorney in Chicago I highly recommend is Damien Sharonis. I seen him represent Anthony Twan Doyle at the Family Secrets trial. I seen him represent Mark Polkman at the Mike Sarno trial. Mark Polkman, as we all know, was a high-ranking outlaw motorcycle gang member. And just recently, he represented Jack Gallione and Mean Gene Casano. He went to war with one of the witnesses, and the very next day on the stand, the FBI agent slipped and said that he was part of an organized crime task force. Damien objected. They cleared the courtroom. The judge declared a mistrial. And then shortly after that, the prosecutor decided to drop the case. That's unheard of at the Dirksen Federal Building, that there's a mistrial and that the prosecution will drop the case. But because of this fine attorney here, that's exactly what happened. Another top defense attorney that was on the Mean Gene and Jack case was Tom Breen, another mob attorney. He represented little Jimmy Marcel at the Family Secrets trial, and he really attacked Nick Calabrese on the stand. He got Nick Calabrese to admit that he was a coward, and he said that Nick Calabrese lied about the making ceremony. It was straight out of a movie where Iupa El Tornabini held the ceremony, and every guy came to the room one by one. They pricked the finger. They had a gun on the table, and they burned the holy card in the hand while Iupa read the oath, just like in the movies. But Tom Breen brought up the fact that Jimmy Marcello couldn't be a main member of the Chicago outfit because he's half Irish, trying to draw reasonable doubt. But this is one of the best attorneys in Chicago. And one of my friends, this guy, we'll call him Scully from Bridgeport. He was a drug dealer. He got pinched by a female cop, female detective. Buddy, his father, Buddy, was kind of like a Chicago outfit associate wannabe, a trucker from the town of Cicero. And Tom Breen did my friend Buddy a favor. Buddy didn't have a lot of money. He gave Tom Breen 10 grand, all he could afford, because my friend Sal was looking at about 40 years in prison. But because of Tom Breen, he ended up doing only 8 to 10 years. He still had to serve his time in Menard, which is a very nasty place. But Tom Breen cut that sentence in half. Still practicing law today. You could actually, if you go anywhere anytime you're in the Dirksen Federal Building or 26 in California, there's a good chance you'll see him. He loves to drink Jack Daniels, and he's somebody approachable. He's somebody you could actually talk to. Another top defense attorney in Chicago, one of the best in my opinion, you got Ralph Meczyk. He was the head counsel at the Family Secret trial. He represented Anthony Twan Doyle. That was the corrupt cop that would visit Frank Calabrese in prison. And he told Doyle to keep his mouth shut and not take the stand. But Doyle wouldn't listen. After seeing Joey Lombardo fail on the stand, after seeing Frank Calabrese fail miserably on the stand, Twan thought he can get up there and bullshit Marcus Funk, Mitch Mars, and John Scully. He failed. He was eventually found guilty. But this is Ralph Meczyk, another top defense attorney in Chicago. Now there's Terrence Gillespie, another top mob attorney in Chicago. She used to live in the same building with him at 400 East Randolph. I've seen him represent several heavyweights in the Chicago outfit over the years. He represented Mike Sarno at the Sarno trial. And he really went after the female agents that were tailing Sarno. One of the agents testified that every time she followed Mike Sarno in the car, he was very cautious, very paranoid. He would drive real slow. He would switch lanes. He would make U-turns out of nowhere. Kind of hard to tail. Unfortunately for Mike Sarno, he was found guilty. The main charge was the arson charge. That's automatic 25 years. In my opinion, all the evidence was against Mark Polkman and some of the other defendants. There wasn't a whole lot, but the government, as always, did a good job tying up all loose ends, cooperating some of their witnesses. And unfortunately for Mike Sarno, he was found guilty. And to Mike's surprise and his family's surprise, The prosecution asked the judge to reprimand Large's bond. They felt he was a flight risk, which is total bullshit. Mike Sarno was not a flight risk. He never once missed a day in court. The guy's like close to 400 pounds. Trust me, he wasn't going anywhere. But the judge, Guzman, agreed with the prosecution that Large was a flight risk, and they took him into custody immediately. I'll never forget it. Large had a little note he prepared to read to the court. He started to tear up a little. So it was Terrence Gillespie, his lawyer, that pulled out the note and read it to the court. I also seen him represent Betty Lauren Maltese. I went to her trial years ago. She was the president of Cicero. Her, a mob guy, and his son, they stole $12 million from the town of Cicero. And her lawyer said in closing arguments that, hey, listen, Betty's broke. Her mom is dying. She needs someone to take care of her. And Betty's daughter has some health issues. Prosecutor gets up there and says, hey, look, I just lost my father. My kid has autism. But let me show you Betty Lauren Maltese gambling receipts. So on the big monitor in the courtroom, they showed her gambling receipts from Bellagio and Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. This woman spent hundreds of thousands of dollars gambling in Vegas. They also showed her house in Henderson Valley, not too far from Mike Tyson. Obviously, Betty was found guilty, did a few years in prison, and is home free today. She actually had a yard sale when she got home. I went to her yard sale, and it was all women's garbage. Nothing there of value to me, but I did buy a golf club. She signed it for me, sold it to me for $5. She said that's the golf club that she used to use to crack her husband, Frank Maltese. We all know Frank Maltese was a Chicago office associate, good friend with Rocky and Felice. And her defense was she blamed everything on her dead husband. Now here's another female defense attorney, O'Donnell. She was Casey's lawyer at Mike Sarno trial. And sometimes some of these mob guys like to have a good-looking female criminal attorney represent them. Like Joey Lombardo had Susan Shantz. And Casey had O'Donnell here. Good-looking girl, very smart, very savvy. I heard rumors that she actually flirted with her clients. We can get into that, though, at a later date. But unfortunately for Casey, unfortunately for Joey Lombardo, even using a good-looking, savvy female prosecutor, that usually doesn't sway the jury at all. Usually the evidence is overwhelming, but she was one of the defense attorneys at the Mike Sarno trial. Here we got Large Mike Sarno. You could see him coming out of the Dirksen Federal Building. Looks like he's talking to one of the reporters. Mike Sarno was charged with overseeing a multi-million-dollar burglary crew, and the prosecutor was able to prove that Mike Sarno gave the order to the crew to blow up that video poker machine. Mike Sarno was good friends with Alex Salerno, Bobby Salerno. Some people think he was the guy that was the biggest threat to Nick Calabrese during the Family Secrets trial when John Ambrose was guarding him. Luckily for Nick, though, they never got to him. But Mike Sarno, I think, got like 25 years. I think the sentence was a little harsh. He's no longer a threat. His mob days are over. They should release him on compassionate release. But that's Mike Sarno, made member of the Chicago outfit. Now here's one of the top defense attorneys in Chicago. You don't hear about Todd Pugh. Now, as I mentioned, all these great attorneys, I've never once seen them win, except this guy. He won twice. He represented Mean Gene at a most recent trial I went to. Gene, Chicago outfit associate on the Elmwood Park faction. He loaned this low-life drug dealer $10,000. The guy only paid him back a couple grand and then was ducking him. So Gene had Jack crack the drug dealer, smack him around a little bit, And any reference to organized crime, they make it a federal case. However, when that agent got on the stand and mentioned the word organized crime, Todd Pugh and Damien declared a mistrial. Sure enough, next day the judge, to everybody's surprise, declared a mistrial. A couple days later, the prosecutor decided not to retry Mean Gene and Jack. That was a huge win for this guy. You can see his prayers came true. Hopefully he'll behave himself and he won't be part of the next round of indictments. There was word in the courtroom that they're going to possibly indict other members of the Elmwood Park crew for gambling and extortion. But Todd Pugh also represented this guy here, Peter Andrews. He was a defendant at the Alderman Eddie Burke trial. We all know Alderman Eddie Burke is the longest running alderman in the city of Chicago, right there off of Archer Avenue on the south side. And Peter Andrews was basically his right-hand man. Whatever Alderman Burke asked him to do, he would do. Most of it was trying to steer business to Eddie Burke's law firm. But Todd Pugh represented Peter, and Peter was found not guilty. He's the only person ever in the 30-plus trials I've been to where a defendant walked out of the Dirksen Federal Building not guilty. Now, here's some of the top prosecutors in the country. In Illinois, we convict. This isn't like L.A. where Rob Blake, movie star, kills his wife, Bonnie, at one of his favorite Italian restaurants. The jury finds him not guilty. Or the Melendez brothers, shotgun blast their parents in the middle of shooting them, reload, and continue to shoot them. First trial, hung jury. O.J. Simpson, professional football star, brutally slaughters his beautiful ex-wife Nicole and her good friend Ron Goldman. 9 out of 12 of juries were black. They found him not guilty. John Gotti, 2-3 trials, not guilty, hung jury. But in Illinois, we don't lose any cases. These guys do an amazing job working with the FBI, cooperating everything. They have a 4 or 5 year investigation. It's pretty much a slam dunk. But in the back, you got U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald. In the middle, you got Gary Shapiro, others like John Scully, Marcus Funk. And here you got Mitch Mars. Mitch Mars put away all the Chicago outfit guys. Anthony Chuan Doyle was on tape talking shit about him. Joey Lombardo went toe-to-toe with him, as well as Anthony Chuan Doyle. But Mitch Mars, I met his mom during the family secrets trial. She told me ever since he was a little boy, he always wanted to put away the bad guy, went to St. Lawrence, went to Georgetown Law. But during the family secrets trial, he kind of had a cough. A lot of us didn't know it, but he had lung cancer. He eventually died after the family secrets trial, but this guy was a legend, prosecuted all your heavyweights in the Chicago outfit, Al Taco, Joey Lombardo, Frankie Caruso, the list goes on and on. Public enemy number one, but this was definitely one of the better guys, a good guy, if you will, and unfortunately, his life was cut too short. Now, here's another U.S. prosecutor, now a federal judge. He prosecuted, he was part of the prosecution team at the family secret trial. You got John Scully. And I'll never forget, on a Saturday morning, right across the street from Dirksen Federal Building is a Dunkin' Donuts. I go there for coffee and actually seen him in there. He recognized me by seeing me in court. And he said to me, "Hey, you're not one of those bad guys, are you?" I said, no, not at all. But it just goes to show you, there they are Saturday morning. The prosecutors are still at work. But these guys work long hours to help put away these bad guys. Another part of the dream team, you got Marcus Funk. He was top prosecutor during the family secrets trial, and he went toe-to-toe with Frank Calabrese. He cross-examined Frank, and he got Frankie to really lose his temper, and Frank Calabrese's mouth, "You're a fucking dead man." He heard it, told Judge Zagel, and they almost barred Frankie Calabrese from the courtroom. But Frank Calabrese threatened this man, Marcus Funk. He also went to war with Frankie Schweiss. Now here's top U.S. prosecutor who's behind all these major mob trials. You got U.S. Patrick Fitzgerald. I'm sure you guys seen him on TV many times. A lot of Chicago Alpha guys despise this guy. Here's a top prosecutor, Titos, a Greek guy, cannot pronounce his name. Him and an Arab prosecutor, Bajit. These were the guys that prosecuted Mike Sarno, alleged street boss Chicago outfit, Mark Polkman, high-ranking outlaw motorcycle gang member, father and son, Anthony and Samuel Bopendenzo, and Casey. They were running a sophisticated burglary crew, and they also had him on an arson. That's where they blew up a video poker competitor in Berwyn. This guy was a stellar prosecutor, very polished, and very convincing. His co-counsel was an Arab Muslim prosecutor, Bajit. I'll never forget. I was at a U2 concert and actually seen him. He saw me. I saw him. I didn't say anything to him. But when Frankie Caruso was sentenced during the family secrets trial, Frankie Schweiss was a defendant at the family secrets trial, but he was too sick to stand trial. But imagine Frankie Schweiss in the courtroom sitting next to Joey Lombardo, Jimmy the Indian, and Frank Calabrese. I don't think Frankie Schweiss would have been able to control himself in court. But at the sentencing, Frankie Schweiss came out in shackles. And when he saw the Muslim prosecutor with the turban on his head, he started yelling racial slurs. And they actually had to remove Frank Schweiss from the courtroom. But this is his top prosecutor for the United States government. Now, we also talk about the federal judges, right? Most of these people are hanging judges. They're all pro-prosecution. To me, it's a little unfair because a lot of times they'll let the prosecution get away with murders. They'll allow pretty much any and all evidence in. But when it comes to the defense, they'll block a lot of defense motions to let certain things in, especially when it comes to the government's star witnesses, these rats, these informants that have a lot of baggage. Some of these guys are pretty nasty men that have committed murders, but the judge does not allow their entire background in. If the jury would hear everything about Nikki Calabrese, B.J. Jehoda, Lenny Patrick, it could have changed their mind. But again, the judges are pro-prosecution. I'll never forget when she handed Joaquin Feliz his sentence. Joaquin Feliz, heavyweight in Chicago outfit. I mean, the guy looks like a fucking linebacker. Big forearms, big hands, big sausages, big neck. Very intimidating guy. Rocky was yelling at her, saying he didn't get a fair trial. It felt like there was 4 prosecutors against him, and that the government star witness, that lying chomo B.J. Jehoda, lied. How could you believe a scumbag like B.J. Jehoda? But it fell on deaf ears. She eventually convicted Sally De Laurentiis, Louis Marino, Bobby Bellavia, and Joaquin Feliz, the entire crew. That was a major blow to the Chicago outfit. Fast forward, I even got invited to Judge Ann Williams' Christmas party. So here I am, a young court buff, surrounded with all these attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys at a Christmas party at the Dirksen Federal Building. Another top no-nonsense judge is Ron Guzman. He presided over the Mike Sarno trial. But this guy was very slick. He allowed Large out on bond, which is unheard of. Normally, a guy like Mike Sarno, with his background and reputation, would be in custody. But he allowed Large to be free during the courtroom. And then towards Christmas time, Large and his lawyer, Terrence Gillespie, asked the judge if Large could go out to dinner with his family. They went to Joe's Steak and Seafood restaurant downtown Chicago, a place I've been to a few times with my cousin and my friends. However, once all the defendants were found guilty, Guzman agreed with the prosecutor that Large was a flight risk and took him into custody immediately. He gave Large 25 years for that bombing. Here's top federal judge who was appointed by President Ronald Reagan. You got Judge James Zagel. This is a no-nonsense judge. He's put away a lot of the Chicago outfit guys. He was the judge during the legendary family secrets trial. He told Mikey Marcello, the only thing you're guilty of is being a loyal brother. He told Jimmy Marcello, he complimented him, saying that Jimmy Marcello was the smartest and the sharpest and the most mature out of all the defendants. He also told Joey Lombardo that, you seem like a pretty charming guy, but you will have to pay for your sins. You have to pay for when you guys killed Danny Seifert. Judge Zagel, though, he one thing the beef I have with Judge Zagel is he gave Nick Calabrese only 6-7 years. Nick Calabrese participated in 14 murders. Judge Zagel was really lean on him, gave him only a few years. And with good behavior, Nick Calabrese did 3-4 years. So imagine participating in 14 murders and only getting 3-4 years. Nick Calabrese also admitted that the government helped pay for his housing. They helped pay for his relocation expenses. They gave him weekly cash envelopes, and they paid $38,000 for his teeth. Not a bad deal. To keep Nick Calabrese out of jail and to testify, they really cut a deal with the devil. I don't think that's fair, but that's the way the government works. Nick Calabrese has passed away. I just did a show on him not too long ago. But some people think he's still alive, but I'm pretty sure he's dead, and I hope he made amends with the man upstairs. But this is Judge Zagel, big-time federal judge that put away all your major mob guys. Now, last but not least, let's have a little fun. Probably the best book ever written on the Family Secrets trial is by Jeff Cohen. There's another reporter named James Jack that wrote a pretty good book. And then obviously Junior Calabrese wrote his. I didn't really care for Junior's book because it was pretty embellished. It was all about him and the reason he did what he did. But it was his letter that started the indictment and the investigation. If it wasn't for his letter, Nicky Calabrese never would have testified. But Jeff Cohen was in court every day. I highly recommend checking out this book. But here on the upper left, you got Joey Hansen. Joey Hansen was a Chicago outfit associate and kind of like a sleeper out in L.A. That's right. The outfit had sleepers all over the country that were on call 24 hours. It was either him or Tony Spilotro that shotgun blasted Danny Seifert right there in Bensonville. He was also part of the original hit team when they were going to kill the Spilotros in Nevada. And when they killed Imovaci, Nick Calabrese fired his gun at Imovaci, but it didn't kill him. But Joey Hansen, who was driving the getaway car, emptied his gun into Imovaci, killing him. But this is a very dangerous man, Joey Hansen. He was talked about a lot, the Family Secrets trial. Right next to him, you got the Breeze, the biggest loan shark in Chicago. Frankie Calabrese, MO was after tailing a guy 2-3 months, learning all his moves, learning all his habits. They would surprise him, jump him, strangle him, usually with a rope. And then Frank Calabrese would give him the Calabrese necktie, slitting their throat from ear to ear, making sure they were dead. I'll never forget seeing Frank Calabrese in the courtroom testifying in his own defense and losing his temper in the courtroom. Next to him, you got the Bull, Angelo LaPetria, boss of the 26th Street crew. Jerry Scalise testified that all the other mobsters and wise guys, nobody liked to be around this guy at his club. But Frankie the Breeze said he was the only one that could look the Bull in the eyes. This man, the Bull, according to the prosecution, led the most vicious killing crew out of all the crews. The Chinatown crew were the best killers. He got pinched during the strawman case where they got caught skimming millions of dollars from mobbed up hotels and casinos in Vegas. Him, Joey Upa, Jack Cerrone, Joey Lombardo, and a couple guys from Kansas City all got indicted. But this was a very dangerous individual here, and he told his brother Jimmy LaPetria that we should have done something about the Calabrese brothers years ago, meaning either kill them or split them up. Now, right next to him, you got Michael Spilotro. We all know what Michael Spilotro did. He was selling cocaine out of hoagies. He was spending a lot of time in Nevada, wanted to be like a Hollywood movie star. Very good friends with Jimmy Marcello, the Calabrese brothers, and Joey Lombardo. But they used Michael to get to Tony. They said that we're going to have a meeting. Michael's going to be a made man, even though he never killed anybody, and Tony's going to be a top boss. They knew going into that meeting they were in a lot of trouble, especially Tony. Michael's wife testified that the day of he went missing, He took off all his jewelry and money, put it in a plastic bag, and told her, if I'm not back by a certain time, something's wrong. His daughter testified that the day he went missing, he kept telling her all morning how much he loved her, how much he loved his daughter. She thought that was a little weird. She also testified that she identified Jimmy Marcello's voice, that Jimmy Marcello was the one that called the Spilotros' house to set up the meeting. Here you got Goomba, 350-pound Chicago outfit enforcer, part of the 26th Street crew. He definitely would have been a part of the family secret indictment, but I believe when the feds went to round everybody up, when the indictment came down in 2005, Goomba had a heart attack. They actually found him dead in a hotel in Rockford. But one of the murders he was involved in was one of those burglars from the Tony Ricardo's house. He was literally jumping up and down on the guy's chest. So imagine a 350-pound man jumping up and down in your chest. This is a very dangerous individual. Below him, you got Joey the Clown Lombardo, Lumpy, boss of the Grand Avenue crew. Joey got indicted in the family secrets trial and was convicted. Mrs. Seifert testified that she believed Joey Lombardo was one of the masked gunmen that took part in the killing of her husband. Below him, you got Butchie. Butchie was a main member of the Wild Bunch crew, the Taylor Street crew. He was talked about quite a bit at the family secrets trial. He was one of the 14 murders that they discussed. He used to piss off a lot of the outfit bosses by going down the Rush Street with 20, 30 guys, bringing a lot of heat, a lot of attention. And when Harry Allman was away, Butchie was accused of stealing, skimming some of the money. Frank Calabrese hated Butchie and pleaded with him several times if they could clip him. Eventually, Nick Calabrese went into great detail on how they killed Butch Petroselli. You could check that out on some my prior stories I did. Right next to him, you got John Fecarata, made member of the 26th Street crew. John Fecarata was one of the best wheelmen in Chicago. He was part of the hit team that killed Danny Seifert. He was part of the hit team that killed Tony and Michael Spilotro. Nikki Calabrese said that when they got to the house in Bensenville, Fecarata beelined it to the bathroom. He was in there a long time, and when he came out, he was white as a ghost. Fecarata thought the hit was for him. Fast forward, after the Spilotros' bodies were found, he was part of the botched burial team. Those bodies weren't supposed to never be found. The bosses had enough with Fecarata's bullshit. He owed No-Nos DeFranzo and a couple guys $200,000. He was bringing his girlfriend on mob-related business. He was spending money foolishly. So they had Nicky Calabrese, his best friend, ended up killing him. But Nick Calabrese, after he killed Fecarata, he dropped one of the bloody gloves. And that glove, the DNA in that glove, matched Nick Calabrese. And it was John Fecarata's bloody glove that ultimately led to the family secret indictment. I did a whole story on John Fecarata you could check out. Here you got Vandermark, Jay Vandermark. He was Chicago Outfit Associate, kind of like a sleeper as well. His son, I forget what his son did, but his son fucked up. And he was one of the main reasons that they had to kill Emo Vaci. Joey Upa wasn't taking any chances. If there was even a peep that you were speaking to the grand jury, Iupa would have you killed. Next to him, you got Junior. If it wasn't for Junior Calabrese, there would never have been a family secrets trial. Joey Lombardo, Jimmy Marcello, and all the defendants probably would be home with their families today. Junior was an admitted cokehead, coke dealer. He actually wore a wire against his father, knowing that he was about to lock up his father for the rest of his life. Now this guy is selling books, looking for a movie deal, and doing tours. But this is Junior Calabrese. He was one of the first witnesses that they called to testify against his brother Frank. To testify against his father Frank, and his uncle Nick. Sorry about that. Right next to that, you got Hitler. Now this guy, Frankie Schweiss, according to prosecution, was one of the masked gunmen that was part of the Danny Seifert hit. Frankie Schweiss tried to handcuff Danny Seifert, he cracked him in the head with the butt of the gun a couple times, but Danny Seifert was so strong, he actually broke free. So Frankie Schweiss fucked up. He's lucky he didn't get killed. Frankie Schweiss also was part of the hit team that was going to kill the Spilotros out in Nevada. He suggested killing Tony and Michael as they left the courtroom with an Uzi. He's also the prime suspect in killing Marilyn Monroe. And then he actually killed his beautiful Greek girlfriend from Greektown and threw her in the Chicago River. This is a very dangerous man. He was too sick to stand for the family secrets trial, but he was eventually guilty. Frankie Schweiss was also, him and Lumpy were on the lam. They lammed it when the family secret trial went down. They eventually picked him up. I think he was living in Kentucky with his girlfriend. And then here you got Mikey Marcello. He was a defendant at the family secrets trial as well, but he pled guilty, and they show a lot of video of him visiting his brother Jimmy Marcello in Milan, Michigan. They're talking in code. They're talking about Pelagio, which is Joy the Clown. They're talking about the Calabrese flipping. They're also talking about the babysitter, John Ambrose. They're trying to get to him because he was in charge of security of Nick Calabrese. But this is Michael Marcello, Chicago outfit associate and loyal brother to little Jimmy Marcello. Below there, you got the car, one of the work cars that the crew used, I believe, in the Danny Seifert hit. On the bottom, you got a burglar, Chicago outfit associate, Constantino, who was brutally murdered by the Calabrese brothers. And then the last guy, I think that's a picture of a young Jimmy I. Jimmy I was a Chicago outfit enforcer, part of the Wild Bunch crew, made a fortune in the trucking business. And after he died, the government actually accused him of being an informant. But that's it for today. Let me know what you guys think. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. And for you haters out there, if you don't like my channel, turn it off. Put out the cigarette, take the dog for a walk, and take the old lady to Olive Garden this weekend. Happy wife, happy life. Ciao, guys.